a critically important thing to learn about functions is that functions can return to us. They can give us back a value. They can give us back any kind of value that they want to. Usually it's going to be a value that is basically the product of their work. So I'm starting here on the 101 functions return file with the functions that we just saw in the previous video of saying hello and adding numbers. And what we're going to talk about is how to return a value from these functions. And the way we return a value from these functions, again, let's review what this say hello function does, is if I come into, let me make sure I'm looking at the right file. Let's go and open live server to the 101 functions return statement. And here we go. In my console, I'm going to execute say hello. Open close parentheses. I'm invoking it, hit enter. Hello world gets logged. It gets logged because we execute the log function here on line 27. That's what it says in our developer tools. Okay, but what if I don't actually want it to say hello? What if I wanted to instead, I just wanted to give me back the message. I wanted to give me back this message because I want to do something with it. And I'll show you what I'm going to do with it in a second. So now that I have this function called say hello, if I were to invoke it here, you might not be able to tell the difference. But notice, there is no line number here. We do say hello. We do see the word say hello, hello world here, but we don't see the console log message coming out, and there's no line number for us to click on. That's because hello world was not actually output by the console log message that was here. It was output because the tool, the developer tool known as the console, received this message and it did something with it. It actually wrote it to the console. Let's illustrate this over here for a second. If we execute say hello out of our code and we hit refresh, you're going to notice that there's actually nothing being rendered here. But rest assured that the function say hello is being executed. Now, because this message is being returned, what does that mean? It means that when I execute this function, there's a value coming out of it, right? So there's a value coming out. There's an output. If you want to capture the output of a function, what you do is you assign it to, let's say, a variable. Here, my variable is going to be called my greeting. And we will see now that, again, it is not going to show up in the console because there's no console log here. But it does show up as a global variable. And that global variable, like all the other variables that we've been working with, it now holds the value of hello world. Okay, notice that because I declared it as the second object in the script element, it shows up as the second one. If I move it down to the third one, it's going to show up as the third one, right? Because it's going to first declare say hello and then add numbers. So there's my greeting. Where did my greeting, if I spit out my greeting, here my greeting is hello world. It's hello world. Where did this hello world come from? It came from the fact that the function called say hello, when executed, returns a value. Now, because now this function is returning a value, I am compelled to change the name of this function. Instead of it saying hello, because it doesn't actually say anything, it doesn't log anything, I'm simply going to return it as get, I'm going to change it to get greeting. The fact that I put this word get there, you're going to see this function often, getting a value, that's one of the signals that this function is going to return something to me. Doesn't always mean that, but it oftentimes means that a function with a prefix of get is going to have a return. That's one of the two ways that it's going to give you back a value. The return is the most important one for the conversation right now, that it is going to give you back a value that you can then assign using the assignment operator to a variable here. Same thing with add numbers. Let me change add numbers to say, instead of, I'm just going to say get result, because I'm trying to mimic this. I could actually make it something else. I could say get, I could actually call it get age, right? Well, let me go with get result first so I can just follow the naming convention here, and then I'll make up another function. So instead of logging, I am going to write return and the semicolon at the end. Boom. Oh, reference error. Say hello is not defined. So beautiful error. I've tried to execute a function that does not exist, so I get the say hello function. Say hello is not defined. And it's telling me that if I click on this line 37, it's going to show me exactly where this error is happening. All right. So that means I just simply had to rename my function that I was calling. And then this is get result. So if I execute get result, again, without the open close parens, it just spits out the value, the actual function body. But when I hit up arrow and open close parens and I execute it, it's giving me back my value. So get result returns an integer. Get greeting returns a string. I could have another function called get. I'm going to call, what am I going to get? I'm going to get desk, right? Let me give it actually, I'm going to call it get pet, and I'm going to create an object called Fido. Here's Fido, and it's an actual dog. So I'm just going to make up some properties here that says it's a dog, and then the name is Fido, okay? There's my dog. If I just hit save on this, we're going to look at the object graph, and we're going to see that globally now we have a function called getPet. There is no reference to Fido, Fido being an object that is declared inside of getPet. But if I were to now say var my favorite pet is equal to getPet, so it's equal to, which means I'm going to assign the return value of getPet to my favorite pet. Put a semicolon there, hit refresh. And we're going to see now that, oh, what are we going to see? This is going to be a good one. My favorite pet is undefined, right? My favorite pet is undefined. Why is that? Let's go execute this function in the console because I made a mistake just now. And I want to say get pet. Notice get pet is undefined. Why is it undefined? This is the return value of the function. It's undefined because I forgot to put in the return statement. So I'm going to say return statement Fido. And if I do that, what's going to show up in my graph is that I actually have Fido. It's an object. It's an object reference. There's a dog Fido. Okay. I can do that time and time again, and I'm going to get back an object that looks exactly like that object Fido. Oh, not get params. Get pet. So there you go. There's my dog, and it's Fido. Now, the thing about the return statement, other things, learning more about the return statement, is that once the code is executing again, it's going to execute top down from the top of the function down. So it's going to execute this line, and then it's going to execute this line, and then if there was another line here, it would execute it. If there was another line here, it would execute it. As soon as your function, as soon as the function body, as soon as that code execution encounters a return statement, no other code is executed. So if for some reason I just had this guy here, I'm going to define it as an empty object, let's say. And let's now say Fido dot type is equal to dog. So I'm basically going to rewrite the properties, and I'm going to add them in dynamically after the initialization. So there's name and there's Fido. Okay. I've declared the object as an empty object, no biggie, and then have declared two properties on that object, and I have returned that object. So I declare and initialize an empty object, and then I assign two properties. Here is this object, my favorite pet, with these two properties. This looks just like the object that I had a moment ago, whether I can execute it here as well, right? Same thing. If I make a slight mistake and I do this, and believe me, even though this seems really obvious, when you get into the thick of it and you're coding and you're just coding and coding and coding, and there's hundreds of lines of code that you're dealing with at any particular point in time, something like this might get past you. I've declared and initialized a variable called Fido, an object literal. It's got no properties. Then I return. And because I return here, you'll see that my favorite pet is just basically an object. It's an empty object. If I execute up arrow here, I see it's an empty object. And so these two lines have not executed. Again, I will illustrate that by both doing that, and then I will say console.log after the return statement, right? And we will see that the console.log never hits, that the pet actually does get a property of type associated with it. It's declared as an empty object literal, and then gets assigned dynamically a property of type that has a value of dog, and then it gets returned. So this code here might as well not even be there. In some development environments, you will actually get a warning. Right now, this is not a very robust, this is just a very simple, straightforward development environment. In this development environment, we are not getting this warning, but in many development environments, you would actually get a warning that says, and it would probably error and keep you from running this code and say, look, this code, line 43 and line 45, it's unreachable. You cannot reach, I cannot reach, the JavaScript engine cannot reach these two lines. That's clearly an error. Why would you write them if they're unreachable? So it would error and it would keep you from running. Again, that's if you're working in a fantastic development environment that's set up with some safeguards. So what you really want to do, and then I'm going to say before the return. So the function can do many things actually, right? It can console log, it can create an object, and it can have a return. It can do all of those things inside of that one function. We'll see here the function is declared. Get pet, just like the other functions. Get pet though will declare a variable object, a local variable, local to the function. And now my greeting is still the greeting that's coming from get greeting. And here's my favorite pet. My favorite pet, again, notice how my favorite pet has no reference to. There's nothing here that tells me where this object came from, right? I don't know, and this is actually a really good feature. There is no dependency of my favorite pet to the function called getPet. We know by looking at this code that my favorite pet came from the execution of getPet. But now that I have this object called Fido, it's completely separated from that function getPet. So examples of declaring variables inside of the function, dynamically adding properties. I'm going to console log. Again, the console log statement is going to show up in the console before the return statement. And even though, right, this is getPet, I'm going to hit up arrow right there. What we have going on here, getPet, it returns me, right? So this is the first thing that fires. It console logs, and then it returns me the object, and the return of that function shows up here. The return of the function shows up after you execute the function. Again, let me illustrate. Get result is going to execute, and it's going to give you back the 11. It shows the return value in the next line. Same thing with get greeting. We're going to execute, we're going to call, we're going to invoke the get greeting function, and there's the hello world message. This variable now, no one has stored it into a variable. That value now just got returned, and there's no variable to capture it. So I can't actually access this variable 11 or the value 11 with a variable because it hasn't been assigned to anything, right? Has not been assigned to anything. Unlike my greeting. My greeting was captured. The return value from get greeting was captured in the variable my greeting. And my favorite pet here, here it is. It's an object, and it is available to us because the return value of the function was captured. Okay, So this is how you return. You can return now an integer. You can return a string. You can return an object. You can return anything, but it needs to be one thing. You can only return one thing. This is a common question. How do I return multiple things from a function? Well, you return those multiple things inside of an object. So here's my object. My object has two things in it. It has a property. Now, it has two properties. So you can say it's returning two separate things. If you really wanted to return two distinct things, if you feel like the two properties of the same one object didn't work, let's write this. I'm going to say get pets. Now, one thing that I've tried to signal by the naming convention, again, we're following camel case naming convention. Now that I've said get pets, one thing that I'm trying to communicate is that I am returning multiple things. So let me declare, I'm going to declare pet 1. And I'm going to say this type is a dog. And let me declare a few pets. Ooh. So here's a cat, a fish, if you happen to be a fish person. So there's pet 2 and there's pet 3. And now I want to declare a variable var, my pets. And so I'm going to declare an empty variable and an empty array, but I don't have to declare an empty array. I could, as I declare my array, just say pet 1, pet 2, and pet 3. So here are my 3 pets, and I'm going to return them. Hit save. In the graph, we're going to see that the function getPets is now globally available for us. Here's getPets. It's a function. Notice that they're not being logged anywhere. No one's executing them anywhere. Nothing going on here. But when I execute it, get pets, what do I get back? I get an array of 3 things. Here's my 3. Here's the link that says 3 things. At index 0, we have a type of dog. Index 1, we have a type of cat. And so there are 3 distinct objects. If we wanted to continue to see these, if I wanted to show you then what this would look like, let's go say for my pets, get pets. All right. So there's get pets, and let's see what this is going to show up like inside of our graph. Let's bring this over to the left. All right, here's my pets. It's just an array, right? So we've seen this from our time in inspecting arrays. Index 0, index 1, index 2. And all of those pointing to reference types. They're a dog, a cat, and a fish. Okay, just like it was before. But we know now that my pets originated from us invoking, right? My pets was assigned the value that was returned by invoking getPets. So we invoke getPets and we assign the return value to my pets. Notice that I could say this a few different ways. Again, really frustrating. Not only can I say I invoke getPets, I call getPets, I'm calling getPets, I'm executing getPets, I'm running getPets. But then, hey, I'm assigning the return value of getPets to my pets. I'm assigning to my favorite pet getPet. I just could say it like that. I'm assigning to my favorite pet getPet. And so I don't even mention the fact that I'm invoking getPet, right? I could say I'm assigning to my pets getPets. Be prepared for those types of conversations, right? And what does that mean? It means that the getPets function is returning something, and in that return statement, I have some type of value. This value, this pointer, is now a pointer to an array, and I'm taking that and I'm assigning it to a variable called my pets. All right. So now, like a lot of things, there are outputs and inputs. So we have just discussed the outputs. We're going to go into the next video to discuss the inputs of functions, which are going to be referred to as parameters and arguments.